Hello, hello, Blackjack once again, and today I'm going to be talking about Rooster Teeth's RWBY. In the next few weeks, I'll be discussing the designs of the main characters, but I accidentally ended up making a huge spiel about the visual development of the series and decided to split into its own video. So, with that said, let's give a bit of a history lesson of how RWBY started to where it went, at least visually speaking. Now, I'm sure most of you know that RWBY is quite a unique series, even now, being from a relatively small studio compared to the other giants in the American anime industry. I'm not going to argue semantics, but I mean like Avatar and things like that. RWBY is, if anything, a triumph of production that has undeniably grown way past its roots as the pet project of the late Monty Oum. Another reason that I find RWBY is unique, even among similar productions, is that it's exceedingly clear that there was a process to it, and one that we at least get to see a little bit. Unlike most anime or TV shows, the development cycle of the various volumes of RWBY aren't exactly public, but we've had enough peeks behind the curtain to catch on to a few details that I'll be discussing throughout this series of videos. If you haven't already checked them out, I'd recommend watching RWBY Rewind, or the Making of RWBY videos to get a little bit more of the background information. And before we begin, we might as well talk about RWBY as a whole, starting with the series creator, Monty Oum. Monty was, above everything, a man who enjoyed stylized action, even working on a number of games as a combat director. And now, I'm sure a fair few of you have seen or at least heard of Monty Oum's work, Haloid, if not Dead Fantasy. Dead Fantasy being most of the female Dead or Alive characters along with the Final Fantasy characters in huge knockout brawls, and Haloid being Master Chief versus Samus Aran. Also, the term fight choreography is thrown around a bit, and a couple of random dance scenes to top it off. Oh, and Master Chief was actually a woman in that series. We'll get to that a bit later. And while those videos no doubt gave Monty a spotlight, and obviously influenced a lot of the future development of RWBY, today I'd like to focus a bit on another one of his animations, the short film Icarus, made for a contest. The contest, per his entry on DeviantArt, was to make a quick movie that emulated director John Woo, whose movies include a lot of stylistic action and, to quote him, vision and the drive for symbolism so strong that you're willing to sacrifice continuity and quality for sheer, powerful symbolism. Now, many people have criticized RWBY both fairly and unfairly, but one thing that most people always talk about, and what sold the series originally for most people, is the fight scenes. Throw logic out the window, that blonde is going to punch the ground, and it's going to look really cool. A lot of the aspects of the characters' designs, weapons, powers, even colors comes together to form a lot of what their character means to them, and how they fight, who they are, what they do in the world is based on these sorts of things. And especially in the early works, you can see that he took a lot of the ideas of action before reason and ran with it, and going with what he knew. Most, if not all, of Monty's works include gun katas, high-impact punches and kicks, impossibly cool action shots, running down walls, that sort of thing. With that said, and a few peeks at Dead Fantasy and Haloid, I'm sure that you can see a few of the things that are very emblematic to current RWBY. Going back to Icarus, two guys way too good at killing people, a bunch of faceless bad guys that get wrecked, and good old-fashioned gung-fu. However, the reason I'm focusing more on Icarus rather than his other more emblematic works, if you take a look at Monty's DeviantArt page where he uploaded it, you can see a bit of the process behind it, and something I find very interesting. During a rendering test, he accidentally loaded the scene without any textures. This left the background almost completely white, with minimal shading. And while this was an accident, this led him to come to the conclusion that he'd run with it. Defining the art style, Monty stated it was more artistic, but also added to its efficiency. After all, one need not bother with textures and backgrounds when it's communicated effectively with just the base textures. The background is even as important as the setting itself. Making a stark white room adds to the artistic appeal. And while the contest was to copy the style of John Woo, the contest encouraged adding your own flair. As opposed to the church in The Killer, and the hospital scene in Hardboiled, Monty chose a library. All rather sterile places with plenty of open space and plenty of things to hide behind. And to contrast John Woo's use of doves in many of his movies, Monty chose something that would become a recurring element in RWBY: crows. However, what really gets me when I see it on his DeviantArt page was the next paragraph. The color palette of strict white, red, and black was a choice I'm very happy I made. Someday I'll make the movie I really wanted to make with the color palette. A stark white library or church with white books. An occasional red book. 2 protagonists dressed in black. All of the antagonists garbed in black with a touch of red. And black crows with red eyes. As a frame of reference, Icarus was submitted to DeviantArt on June 18th, 2007. That's 5 years before the Red trailer came out, and 12 from the time of writing. Yeah, an accidental rendering ended up as the basis of the art style for RWBY, at least early on. Especially prevalent in the red, white, and black trailers, you can see the ethos of the color choices, choosing the things that stand out the most. RWBY, the lone red figure on the white snow, Weiss, the woman in white on the monochromatic stage, and Blake, the girl in black in the forest of red trees. The simpler aesthetic was lost over the volumes as the series required more defined locations, but I still think it's interesting to see a concept like it. After all, stuff like that can leave a striking image, plus it cuts down on development time due to the simplified environments, perfect for a person working almost alone. That said, I don't think there are many people that would disagree that what RWBY became is a bit greater than what it was, at least visually. Part of this can be chalked up to the fact that the original Red trailer, along with quite a bit of the series animation itself, was handled by Monty himself, with help from Miles Luna and Kerry Shawcross for writing. And as the series grew, so did the team that made it. Even before then, you can see a few places where things changed. I'll discuss it in a bit more detail later, and even further once I make a video about RWBY, but the Red trailer, and the trailers as a whole, were self-admitted weapon demos more than actual character trailers. You do get plenty of story in the black trailer and a bit in the yellow, but they are more about the actual weapons and the actual girls than they are about the actual story as a whole. In the original Red trailer, you can already notice the fact that it's in an incomplete state. The most obvious is that the enemies she's fighting, the Beowulfs, are completely black with red eyes and teeth. In the series proper, these were given a facelift, adding in patterned bone faces and claws. I honestly really like to see the little changes like this, as it's interesting to see how the series developed and grew from the mind of one man to mix in with a team. Series artist Patrick Rodriguez redesigned the Beowulfs to go along with the idea of the Grimm, the collective enemy of the series rather than just a random wolf monster. And aside from that, another thing of note is RWBY herself. Like I said, the trailer was a tech demo, selling the idea of the gun weapon combat and showing off the design, so RWBY didn't actually have much of a personality or story just yet, and that was been confirmed. In fact, I remember people initially writing off the series altogether when the Yellow trailer premiered, where RWBY had her first lines. She spends the Red trailer completely silent, so people assume that she was a soft-spoken goth as opposed to the more energetic, childish little Red we've come to know, mostly based on just her clothes. A well-known fact, well, that may have gotten lost to the ages, is that the base versions of the girls' personalities were based on their voice actresses, RWBY being partially based on voice actor Lindsay, at the time, Tuggy. This decision was made pretty early on, as the 4 main actresses are listed in the original trailer, but this decision was likely made before the actual writing process began. Also, before she had a fleshed-out personality, RWBY's design also wasn't finalized either. Though minor, it's a note to see that her cape originally wrapped around her neck, whereas later on it's pinned in place by 2 crosses. This is due to issues arising when animated. It'd be a huge waste of time to worry about things like that, especially early on in the series when the team was so small. And speaking of the cross pins, what would become her Rose logo originally was a small cross. Now, religion in the series doesn't match up with real life, so it's a bit strange to see her with a religious symbol, and more so when Crow still has one, even in the series itself. I always wonder if that's just to fit with the gothic aesthetic, or maybe just a holdover or self-reference from her early design. And even RWBY's concept art doesn't match up entirely. The original art by Ann Lee has the updated cape, but keeps the cross pin instead of the Rose logo. And her corset also contains some extra red not seen in the final design. And again, I'm not criticizing these changes. In fact, I really enjoy the fact that we've seen the background develop as much as the series proper itself. And I like the idea of having to fix things to make them better for time. And the other thing the trailer sets up is the idea behind a design. Sticking to a combination of modern day and fantastical elements, characters are built around 2 main things, with some exceptions. 1, a color, and 2, an origin taken from a theme of some kind. The Red trailer makes it abundantly clear that RWBY is based on the classic fairy tale Little Red Riding Hood, shown in how she wears a red hood and fights monsters based on the Big Bad Wolf. Many other characters that appear are also based on themes, usually localized within their own team. RWBY with fairy tales, and Juniper with the oddly specific, cross-dressing historical figures, Coffee with coffee and snacks, and most other characters, even minor ones, finding some sort of origin and myth or story. And despite RWBY being a girl in a more medieval-esque outfit with modern flair, the series goes on to show that its other characters have designs that encompass modern clothes, fantasy outfits, medieval armor, fairy tale origins, historical figures, and animal traits to create a mishmash of memorable characters based on color and theme. I'll talk more on it later, but I do love the fashion aesthetic of RWBY and what it says about the world, all of which started from the very first set of trailers and the strong character designs of the four main girls. And another reason to mention the fashion and design of the characters at large is that some are emergent. What I mean by this is that the RWBY is mentioned a few times where a snap decision was made, and this led to huge changes that directly affected the story. All of which being people's reactions to character designs, making them want to include them more. While it no doubt caused some problems here or there, the story of RWBY isn't completely set in stone. However, I'm sure that few people would rather we go down the path where we don't have Neo or Velvet. Our favorite rabbit was actually just supposed to be a random font design for Cardin to pick on, and RWBY admits that the original plan of a man with an elephant nose wouldn't have gone over quite as well. Neo shares a similar story. In fact, it's on record that she was conceived, created, and thrown into the story itself within less than 2 weeks. Monty got the idea to design her based on a female Roman torture cosplay, and now we have a major player in the story with her own character arc and motivation. And all that based on a character that was literally thrown into the story within 2 weeks of her being actually created. And she's one of the fan favorite designs, even if she doesn't even speak or at most didn't have a role in the beginning. And now that we're done with the beginning aesthetic of RWBY and some of the emergent designs, we can move on to the next big jump in the series. This brings us to the split between volumes 3 and 4, and while I could talk about the minor visual improvements the series went through volumes 1 through 3, it'll be more interesting to mention the big change. Also, a bit late, but here's a spoiler warning for Volume 3 finale, as it's impossible to talk about Volume 4's development without it. Volume 3 ended with a big push forward in the story. After the death of Pyrrha, the fall of Beacon, and the introduction of series villain Salem, the world of RWBY faced significant growth. To coincide with this, and the break between Volume 3 and 4, Rooster Teeth decided to take advantage of the change in tone and update their animation, changing from Poser Pro to Autodesk Maya. Everything in the series got a much-needed facelift, and conveniently taking place alongside the evolution of the characters, the technology evolved, giving the world of RWBY a whole new, much improved and polished look, fitting with the darker tone the story was going to start taking from now on. The new Red trailer was the first public display of the series' change, showing off RWBY with a new outfit and the updated production cycle. And by now, the team making the series had grown exponentially, requiring its own sub-office from the other part of Rooster Teeth. The RWBY had gone from a small team of animators to a team of animators, sound technicians, background artists, concept artists, cleanup writers, and countless other jobs that needed special attention, greatly improving the series and the series' flow. And what started out as a pet project from one man given the opportunity to create whatever he wanted grew to become a project requiring its own office and team. The added talent helped make RWBY into a worldwide franchise, spinning off into manga, video games, apps, and a huge place in the Japanese market that the crew is still amazed to see. And that brings us to the end of this quick little history lesson. This grew to be quite a bit bigger than expected. It was originally just a pre-roll for the RWBY video, but that's what you get when you talk about a series with a heavy emphasis on character design, art direction, and one's keen idea to keep moving forward. So, go ahead and join me next time as I talk Ruby Rose and her design in respect to the series. I have what I feel to be some interesting opinions on our Little Red Riding Hood and what her outfits have to say about her character, so I look forward to that. And I'll also be going over the other main characters, and if I keep schedule, I'll be done right in time for RTX. They've hinted that we'll be seeing some new outfits for the Atlas arc, so I'm excited to talk about those once we see more of them. Blackjack out.